Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Divorce, Money, Psych, and Law podcast. Sit down with the California divorce experts, financial divorce consultant Mark Hill, psychologist Scott Weiner, and attorney Shawn Weber for a frank and casual conversation about divorce, separation, co-parenting, and the difficult decisions real people like you face during these tough times. We know that if you are looking at divorce or separation, it can be scary and overwhelming. With combined experience of over 70 years in divorce and conflict management, we are here for you and look forward to helping by sharing our unique ideas, thoughts, and perspectives on divorce, separation, and co-parenting.
Welcome, everybody. This is Mark Hill. Together with Scott Weiner and Shawn Weber, we are the Three Wise Men of Divorce. And today we are excited and delighted to have my longtime friend and colleague, Nancy Ross. Nancy is a marriage and family therapist from Northern California. She was instrumental in creating collaborative divorce. She did this work back in the 90s, and I didn't get to hear about it until 2001. But Nancy, welcome, and thank you for doing this for us.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yay!
So what's our topic today?
Well, we're thinking a lot about, you've been in this business a while. I don't want to date you, but you've been, well, I would date you, but I wouldn't want to date you that way.
I'd date her too.
Except I'm a married man. But
Oh, come on. I could tease you now, Shawn.
Yeah, but okay, now, Dr. Weiner, can you get serious for a minute?
Okay,
all
right.
So what we've noticed that people are more intense, that divorce is something that's happening largely because they're kind of thrust together. And we were just kind of curious, does this seem different to you now than it did before?
It seems really different. I'm thinking back to the last crisis when we had the economic downturn around 2008. And at that time, people were forced to stay together in the house because they couldn't afford to move out. They just couldn't afford two homes. What's different now is they're getting a divorce, they're initiating divorces because they're forced to stay together. They feel trapped, they're depressed, there's an increase in alcohol and drug abuse. So in addition to a normal kind of divorce that we'll see in collaborative when we're working together and I'm the coach, I'm having to deal with substance abuse far more than I usually do. Some kind of domestic violence, not extreme, but at some levels, coercion, power struggles. And here are people getting divorced in the middle of a pandemic. You've got to be pretty unhappy, pretty frustrated, and somewhat desperate to do that. So they need coaches. They need all of us to be able to get them through it.
So when you talk about, they need coaches, what would that coaching look like for them?
Well, that's kind of interesting too, because in my other hat, I'm a family therapist. And I really like to work with entire families as they go through transitions. And in coaching, it's sort of like therapy, but not really. So the difference I often tell people is that when I'm coaching someone, it's a specific outcome. They have to make decisions. Whereas in therapy, you can have people try things and experiment a bit and come back the next week and go through it and keep working with it. In divorce, they've got to make decisions. And couples don't know how to do that. In fact, I've probably seen maybe 1,000 divorces. Wow. And I have never, ever seen a couple that managed to get through that second stage. What we call the second stage, when a couple looks at each other and says, hey, can I really be me? And you're still going to love me the way I am? So we see couples coming to divorce and they haven't accepted each other really, and they continue the battle throughout the divorce. So what they need a coach for is to change that pattern, to get them into the next phase. And the next phase in divorce is going to be how do they co-parent, or do they divorce with some degree of self-respect and building some skill in the process. So as a coach, it's just an incredible opportunity to work with people, to help them build those skills, to see, particularly, I see a lot of women coming into the process and they're scared and they're confused. But oddly enough, when they exit because they've had the coaching, they're a lot more confident. They're a lot more knowledgeable. I do that with a team. I don't do that by myself. We work together. I work with Mark. I work with Shawn and other lawyers and financials. So this is an incredible opportunity for the client I'm coaching to really grow and change throughout the process.
So Nancy, what do you say when you have a situation, as we tend to get, and it's not always the man, but it tends to be, where the response is, well, I don't need a coach, but my wife certainly needs one.
Okay, so he doesn't want a coach, and so you're—
No, he doesn't need one. It's not that he doesn't want one. He doesn't. She's crazy. I'm fine. Just fix her and the marriage would have worked.
So he has all the answers. Well, you have to take the resistance, right? So
Yeah.
the resistance, you go with the resistance. You say, absolutely, you don't need one. It's very clear. You've got your path. You know what you want. But you know what? If you have one, it may help her relax a little bit. She's not going to worry so much. And she'll be able to work with you in a much better way, an easier way. It's going to make life easier for you. Of course, you're just fine. You don't need them.
Boy, you are good. I mean, that's a good point, though. I mean,
I want to see her hands. I want to see the hands that have been wielding that shovel.
No, it's very it's a tremendous skill. I got to say, you have to meet the people where they are, right? You got to speak their language.
Yeah.
And you, I mean, the worst thing you can say is, well, of course you need a coach. It's obvious from how narcissistic you are that you definitely need. You wouldn't say that, right?
I wouldn't. I mean, I might be tempted, but you know what? Being a coach is different than being a therapist. I can be really direct with guys, and they like it. Guys are looking for that. They appreciate a woman who's going to be direct, who's not going to beat around the bush or, try to schmooze them or talk psychobabble. Because being a coach means meeting people where they are.
And not diagnosing, right, Nancy?
Oh, absolutely not diagnosing. That's really contrary to what you do as a coach. You're looking at—
You don't do that much of that as a therapist either, for that matter.
Not as a family therapist, I don't. I sometimes would like to throw DSM-5 out the door and just treat people for where they are and what they need to be. Yes.
Yeah. How many times does somebody come into your office and they say, "Oh, my spouse is a borderline personality"?
Oh, yes.
Or whatever. And you know that one of three things is true. Either they're right, their spouse is a borderline personality, or something's wrong. Or two, they're both crazy.
Yeah.
That's my DSM-5 term. They're both crazy. Or three, it's the person in front of you that's got the problem.
Yeah.
Doing a little projection. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And we also have made an observation in recent years that the degree to which someone needs a coach is equally proportional to how they resist.
I think that's really true. And that goes back to, how do you connect with a person? I think one of the reasons— we had an argument early on in our field about whether or not to say this was counseling or coaching. And I sort of advocated for coaching because it doesn't carry that kind of onus that therapy or counseling does. So most people are familiar with coaching. Guys are familiar with coaching, and they're the most resistant. I'm stereotyping, but it's true.
Yep.
Absolutely.
They like the idea of coaching. I mean, who doesn't like their coach?
Yeah. In this model, I'm aligned. I'm on that person's side. I've got their back. And they make mistakes that aren't in their best interest, I'm going to call those out.
Interesting. So Nancy, you've been doing this for 20 plus years. My question to you is, how have you seen the work change over the years?
Well, I think from the professional standpoint, we started out with this great idea of being a team, but nobody was used to working as a team. They didn't know what it really meant, the kind of trust, the kind of skill, and even the structure. Like, we all meet together now in the same room with the clients, even though we may meet with them separately and coach them and work with them in our separate bailiwicks, so to speak. But initially we were all separate, and it didn't work. It didn't work for the clients, and it didn't work for us to be a real team and to be able to help them. But now we've reached a stage where we just kind of seamlessly go through it. From one meeting, we plan the next, the clients are involved. And I think a key piece too is the fact that the clients are part of the team. And that's a hard concept for a lot of professionals. But in our model, in the collaborative model, we treat them, we want their input. We want them to get the skills. We want them to run with it. We're there to help them, to coach them, but it's really their decision making. So it's sort of mediation on steroids, if you will.
Mm-hmm. I describe it as mediation with resources at the table.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think exactly that's what it is. So from a client standpoint, I think it's more seamless, it's less expensive, but they get a lot more services. They get, what do? They get coaching in their relationships when maybe a co-parent. They get feedback about how their kids are doing, and they get to figure that out with a child specialist. They have their lawyers giving them legal advice and support, and you, Mark, giving them incredible financial education.
They come out with a financial plan that is actually explicit. Everybody's interests are addressed. Yeah.
And what Mark can do is, usually there's one partner, because they've kind of done this, one is knowledgeable about finances and the division of labor, so to speak, and the other one hasn't really paid that much attention. And coming into a divorce, that can be a real handicap. So with the other person's permission, Mark can spend time. And that's what I think you do, Mark, that is just so incredible.
Educate and try to create a level playing field around an area where there was a real imbalance of power prior to the divorce.
And what really works powerfully here is the lawyers, when they get it, they get out of the way. We provide legal advice, but then we get out of the way and we let the coaches and the financial person work to help this couple transition their family. So you've got a couple that maybe they've been married 25, 30 years. They've defined their whole lives on being married to the other person, being a parent, and then this marriage starts to take a turn. And they come to see you. What's the one most important piece of advice that a couple or person who just sees their whole world just dropping before them that you could give them?
I think to normalize whatever stage they're in, because Shawn, they're going to be in different places. Usually one has already decided on the divorce and maybe has done some grieving, and the other one has to catch up. They haven't even got their feet on the ground. They're still in shock. So normalizing the stage they're in, having them understand they've got to pace it, and we can work with them to pace it. So the one that's already out the door, maybe an eye on another relationship even, can slow down and develop the empathy that that person needs. For the one who's just heard about it and doesn't know, whether or not they're going to have to go back to work or change jobs or be saddled with huge debt over the next so many years. They've got so many things to figure out. You have to have them be in the moment. They have to be where they are, and then you normalize what stage they're in. whether that's in shock or whether they're starting through the ambivalent stage. I got a client I talked to this morning, and he's telling me that his wife moved out and she doesn't know if she wants to stay separated, but they're in mediation. They're sort of getting a divorce, sort of. And he's not getting a clear message from her. So I said, what would you do if she picked up the phone and she said, I'm coming back today. Let's make our marriage work. And he had to stop and think. And he realized his own ambivalence. He'd been so focused on her that he wasn't ready to just start up the marriage again. He had to really think about it. And we just stayed with the ambivalence. We just explored a little bit, what's the fear about being single and having a new life? They've been married 30 years and they have 2 grown children. So it's, and he's afraid the children are going to be on her side, which is another piece. So you take all that and you just kind of work where they are and you have them talk about it, work with the emotions, and then come up with a plan. Because the only way people get through this is to have a plan, something concrete.
You're good,
Yeah.
lady.
Yeah, the plan, that calms people down more than anything when they know that they have a future. That's what I've experienced.
Yeah, and around the money, there's a lot of fear in this process, especially on the behalf of what I call the unmoneyed spouse, the one who has not been involved in the finances on a day-to-day basis during the marriage. And part of the fear is the unknown. And I go back to my 20s when I was trying to start a business and run a business, being totally undercapitalized and realizing it was failing. And just figuring if I worked another 5 hours a week or 10 hours a week that I could make it work. And a friend of mine pointed out that I could change the economy by working a few more hours. That was probably a good advice to hear. But once I spent many sleepless nights not being aware of how bad the money was because I didn't want to look at it because I was terrified.
Yeah.
When I looked at it, yes, it was bad, but it wasn't as bad as I'd been worrying about for weeks. So quantifying it often helps at least put the problem in perspective, and then we can look at solutions. But while you're out there and it's this huge amorphous object coming at you, you cannot be rational and you cannot make good decisions.
And that's why I like how we work together. It's not like we're separate. Like you could do that part by yourself pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if we work together and Shawn is part of our team, then I can help the person deal with the fear of not looking at it. And then the confidence and encouragement of what do you do, and somehow being together, it's synergistic, then the person gets the message they're going to be okay.
Right. Yeah.
It really is a team effort. It really is our working together that creates that kind of chemistry.
The trust and the respect are themselves infectious.
Oh boy.
It really does, the team has its own inertia in a positive kind of way. There's sort of a steadiness there. It's a bigger ship sailing through stormy waters,
Really.
And it's just, now I have some experience working, especially with Shawn. We've had some cases that have, as we say, have fallen out where, people just couldn't get on the boat, They just couldn't. There was always this other, I gotta kick his ass, or I gotta kick her ass, sitting there in the wings, ready to wash over the bow.
Yeah.
And,
You mean the third party?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
often the case, isn't it? Yeah.
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 But by and large, even in the more tempestuous ones, the stable ship really has done its magic,
Yeah. A lot of people sort of need, I don't know if I should say this or not, but reparenting. And it's kind of like when you're scared, you feel like a kid. you don't know anything. We've seen 1,000 divorces. They haven't been through usually more than one, maybe two. And they need people who know what they're doing and can help them through it and feel secure and confident in doing that. You feel like a kid when you're going through this. I think we forget what our clients feel like.
Well, because it's probably their first time getting a divorce, and this is scary. And I've never lived like this before. What is this? Or maybe their only frame of reference is their parents' horrible divorce.
That's true.
And what we see is that we see often very accomplished professionals coming to us.
Yes.
And so we make assumptions, at least I do.
Yeah.
Good Lord, this man's a doctor, this woman's an executive. I mean, they must A, B, or C understand the money, or they must get this. And that's a presumption based upon my perception of where they are in society, not what their true knowledge is. And I need to guard against that.
It's where they are emotionally at the time that matter.
Yeah.
It's what you do with that emotion. And because there are gender differences. Maybe we should talk about that since I'm outnumbered here 3-1. So, yeah, the classic one is that the guy, as you said earlier, Mark, is really believing he needs to look like he knows what he's doing, at least. He needs to look like he's in charge.
Men don't ask for directions, right?
No, not even in divorce. And the poor guy is trying to keep up this facade, and he can't be real, and he can't really say where he's afraid or what's happening behind the scenes. And so sometimes it gets turned into anger or resentments or resistance. So in that alone, the idea of being able to coach that person through and let them know it's okay to acknowledge how you're thinking and feeling, and you don't have to be in charge of it. And that makes a difference. Then you break the pattern between the two that are divorcing.
And I find sometimes that, I meet with the couple, and one, usually the wife, but not always, increasingly less these days, will say, well, he handled everything.
Yes.
And he is anxious because now he's got a professional financial advisor with X number of years experience looking over his shoulder and looking at, I always remember it years ago when I was an investment advisor trying to get new clients. Very early on, I meet with this guy, I have lunch with him a couple of times. I think he's got some money, but I don't know. And eventually I say, look, sir, if you don't tell me your situation, there's no way I can help you. His response to me was, well, this is it, isn't it? I said, what do you mean? He said, this is where I have to let down my financial pants.
Oh.
He said, I have made some good financial decisions, but I've made some awful ones too. And now I've got to show you all of that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, the vulnerability. It's really hard. I mean, I see you, Mark, working with guys, and they sometimes get competitive with you just for that reason. Like they know.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Right. They don't need me, about a third of them. You know that.
And nobody needs a coach. Hell.
Right.
Shawn's probably feeling so good now that we're all so superfluous.
Well, everybody needs a lawyer. Lawyers are the most popular people in the world.
And the most important, you forgot that.
But
right.
I do want to say this, Shawn, because I have cases with you, and it is so much fun. I know that's the wrong term to use. It's delightful.
It is fun
to be able to work
rewarding.
together. It really is.
It is fun to work with people.
It is.
I find it professionally and personally rewarding to work with good teams.
Yes, because we can focus on the client together, and we can keep their well-being, and we do hold that container for them.
Yeah.
And we do it because we all trust each other. It's what Scott said earlier. It's the team trust. And the clients do sense that. And it is just as Scott said, it's contagious.
When my juices really get flowing on a case is when you have that moment where there's understanding.
Yes.
and there's a shift in the room. You can just feel the energy in the room change, and there's a shift, and it goes from being competitive with one another and sparring with one another to, oh, we can work together to solve something.
Yep.
Those are magical moments.
It doesn't mean we're going to go out and be best friends. Maybe we're not going to get along anymore, and we're not going to go hang out, but we can at least be adults and we can solve something in a productive way. Maybe do right by the kids.
Yep. I see that.
And I just love that when that happens. It's like a switch goes off,
Yeah, and when that happens, you see people kind of shift into their authentic selves. Because up to then, they were defending, they were protecting, they were posturing, perhaps positioning. But that moment when they kind of get it, there's a deeper level of understanding that we're not adversaries anymore. That's not what this is. They come into it thinking that, because all in our culture, it's kind of set up that a divorce means you take sides, you're adversaries. But
it's a law case.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly true.
But when people get to that place where they're able to start being productive, they feel safe. And that's when they let their guard down. They're more vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's why I always have food in my conference room, Nancy. Now that we're doing COVID, I can't have food, right? But I always have food in my conference room because
where it went?
That's where it went. I'm sorry, Scott. Scott always used to steal my chocolate. But
I'm 2 doors down from his conference room, and he used to have these little Dove caramels in there.
Oh, aren't those good?
Well, they were so helpful for me.
And they have little chocolate is the great elixir of settlement. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But I learned that when people start eating, that's when they feel safe.
Yes, I have a story about that. One of the lawyers tells very early on when we were just starting to do this, someone suggested that food was kind of tame the savage beast, when you're eating. And so the lawyer tells the story that it was a very contentious divorce. And he thought that everything was going south. And the other lawyer was being incredibly uncooperative and kind of going back into adversarial mode. So he was feeling really alone. And then he kind of was able to turn the conversation a bit. Things seemed to relax, kind of that bit of that moment you're talking about, Shawn. And the man reached out and took a grape. And it was the first time anybody had touched the food. And he took the grape and he just kind of sat back. And he knew then that they were on a different course. It was like everybody relaxed. And it was just a symbolic thing around this silly grape in the middle of the table. But it worked.
It does work. I learned this from my cat. When you watch your cat eat, the cat's always scared that there's a predator that's going to come and eat him.
Yeah.
So she'll look over his shoulder. Nobody's there. Okay, I can start eating. And then somebody gets in the refrigerator, jumps. Oh my gosh, somebody's going to eat me.
Yeah.
Looks around again. And then when he feels safe, he'll go back to the food.
Yeah.
And I think people are not terribly different.
We forget how scared people are coming into this, how uneasy. Yeah. It's like putting them in with a whole different language, putting them in a different culture, a divorce culture. And they don't have tools, skills, or history or experience to do this.
It's like you're dragging them through a haunted house, expecting them to make decisions about their 401k.
Pretty much. And they don't have it. That's why the team is so important, to keep that container, keep the message going. You're going to be okay. Yeah, we're here for you. We can help you through it. And always our empathy, no matter how many divorces we see, to look at the person and kind of see it through that person's eyes. What is their experience? What are they feeling? That's crucial. Everybody's different.
And often what people want in a divorce and why they think they want to go to court is because they just want to be heard.
Oh boy.
And the adversarial system, the only opportunity to be heard is really in court.
Yeah.
We give an opportunity to be heard, but heard in a safe environment for the other spouse to hear it. And the work that you and Scott do, Nancy, is work that allows the creation of an environment where that can be spoken and heard.
Yes.
And that is so critical because I remember my wife, we were rear-ended many years ago, and my wife was hurt. You know, her back was hurt, and it was real. And we went to, and she filed suit on this. She was really upset about it because the guy, it was a lawyer. He ran into the back of us up in LA, jumps out of his car, doesn't come to see if we can hurt us. He grabs somebody on the side and says, will you deliver this? It needs to be 3 blocks down the street by 5 p.m. His concern was more getting his filing to this lawyer's office or court. I don't know where he was going. And that just really upset my wife. You know what she wanted? We didn't want money. She wanted a sorry, an apology,
Yes.
the acknowledgement of what had occurred. And we never got it. We never got it because in the adversarial system, the admission of an apology is like an admission of guilt, and you're not allowed to go there. In this process, it's okay to be sorry. It's okay to take some responsibility.
In fact, we encourage it, don't we? I know Scott does this, that if someone has really hurt someone else or created a problem for the children in some way, to coach that person how to make a sincere, deep amends before healing can start.
Not just in this world, in all the worlds that we work in.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's right.
Wouldn't it be a nice world if people could do that? And then be able to hear it. That's the other thing that's a challenge, I think.
Yeah.
You know, maybe you want to sorry isn't good enough. I still want to be mad.
Right.
Yes. That's why we have two coaches, because
right?
Exactly.
To prepare the person to hear it.
yeah,
Right.
you got to have somebody on the other side.
And to acknowledge it. It's a hard thing to do, to say sorry to somebody who hates you
No.
or is angry with you, right? And so
Yes.
if you offer an apology and it's rejected, well, I'm not doing that again. Last time I'm going to give anything to her at all, because that's like being slapped in the face, you know?
It is. And these couples have this pattern very often where one is vulnerable, the other one has jumped on it because they finally feel, okay, now I get my chance. And then they keep that going. So being vulnerable invites, from their point of view, that kind of retribution and attack. So who's going to do that again? That's why you really need to coach.
Oh my.
I love how you're describing being vulnerable as a really important, positive thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because normally when we hear, oh, I'm going to be vulnerable, that sounds dangerous. That sounds not safe. That sounds weak.
It's the word for wound.
But it really is strong.
In Latin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But to be vulnerable, to be truly vulnerable with someone and willingly do that is a real sign of strength, I think.
Yeah, to have it now. If you can have people make that shift to realizing vulnerability, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be attacked. I feel okay. In fact, I feel more real than I've ever felt in my whole life.
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge.
And the concept of being generous, showing some generosity, which virtually never occurs during adversarial, but it can be so powerful. I told the story about where I took the husband out of the room, took him into another room, and I said, okay, you've done it. You've stumped the mediator. I got no bullets left. I don't know what I'm going to do. And the guy looked at me, his mouth dropped open. It's like, well, we're paying you to do this. And I said, well, there is one thing we haven't tried: generosity. And he looked at me, and we had a little bit of a long conversation. I said, you've already told me you don't care about item X that you keep talking about. Why don't you go in and offer that to her and see what happens? Just say, you know what, I'm going to give you X. It was like the domino fell. A case settled within, I think, the next hour. And it was because it shocked her that he would actually give her something. And then, if he's going to do that, then I'll do this. We don't get that in the adversarial process. It's seen as weakness, bad vulnerability.
I'm hearing you say that, Mark, and I'm putting myself in the position of the frightened soon to be divorced person, and they're like, that sounds sweet and everything, what you're saying there, Mark, but have you met my husband? And if I'm the slightest amount vulnerable with him, he's going to eat me alive.
Well,
what
that's
do you
why
say to a person who has that concern?
That's why we create a safe place where you have resources available to you in order to have this difficult conversation. Nancy, you got a better way of saying it, I'll bet.
Well, I think if someone is saying, and this is true, Shawn, we know that that's what people feel like sometimes, I'm not going to do what you're suggesting I do. So you turn it back to them. You say, okay, tell me what's worked. Tell me what you've done before. And then we build on that. We don't try, again, we're not going with their resistance. We're not trying to convince them of anything, trying to make them more powerful so they can do what they need to do.
That's it, making them more powerful.
I think there's another thing going on too with the team. There's another quiet element that is very powerful with the team, which is that when they are sitting surrounded with a group of professionals, all kindly intended and nobody being mean, it's kind of hard for them to be a bully, because they're just not, even some bully, and I guess we're recording, so I'm not going to use the term that is absolutely front of my mind here. One of those, they just don't feel as at ease being that way. They can get loud and blustery and the team just doesn't react.
We don't.
It's like, so it automatically frames bad behavior as, all right, we understand you had to vent that. Now let's talk about that. Let's work toward, like, here's your interest, here's hers. Let's keep going.
Yep.
And it turns the bad behavior into an irrelevancy, and some of that is just because the team is a big ship. It is. They can't knock the goddamn boat over so easily by being a jerk, and
That's true.
And we don't hold it against them either.
That's right.
So Nancy, it's been great having you come join us and talk to us.
Thank you. This was fun. This was easy.
I gotta say, I've been telling people, that we've had a case together. I'm like, oh my gosh, working with her is like a master class every time we work together.
I bet it is.
It's just an absolute pleasure to work with you, and I know that your clients are blessed to have you work with them.
Thank you, Shawn. With you giving me that much of a big head, how can it go south, right? We know, Scott, in our field, when people put you up here.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time.
Oh boy.
Thank you.
But it's not faint praise, Nancy. So
no, I mean that
sincerely.
You're,
and
I never praise Scott.
I can believe that. Yes.
No, that's not true. Scott's a great coach. He's a great coach. He's great to work with. You guys would have fun working on a case.
So
we would.
On a case together. We need a case.
We should make it happen.
Yeah.
Any thoughts? Any parting thoughts, Nancy, that you would want to leave with folks that are struggling with what they're going through?
Trust your process. Trust the people you're working with, and figure that this too shall pass. I mean, it's the ultimate, whether it's COVID, whether it's divorce, this too shall pass. If you live long enough, you learn that.
There you go. Cheers to that. So Nancy, if people wanted to get a hold of you to get some coaching or other or marriage and family therapy or other services, how would they get a hold of you?
Oh, they can just call me, 408-973-1001, or just go on my website. Just Google me, they'll find me. My name, Nancy J. Ross.
Scott, that sounds a lot like how people should get a hold of you.
Yes, but I haven't gone so far as to put up a website. I just work on the telephone, and I do answer my own phone too. 619-417-5743 in Solana Beach, and my name is Scott Weiner.
And Mark, they want to get that financial planning figured out. They want to get their futures figured out. What do they do?
Well, I've been dragged kicking and screaming into the 21st century. So I do have a website. It's pacdivorce.com, PACDIVORCE.com. My contact information is on there. I'd be delighted to hear from anybody that could use my assistance.
And feeling justifiably so that I may be one of the people that have drugged you into the 21st century. I have a website as well. If people want to reach out to me to solve any dispute, it's WeberDisputeResolution.com. That's WeberDisputeResolution.com. Weber with one B, like the grill. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Three Wise Men of Divorce: Money, Psych, and Law. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with others who may be in a similar place. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, and focused on a positive, bright future. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Every family law case is unique, so no legal, financial, or mental health advice is intended during this podcast. If you need help with your specific situation, feel free to schedule a time to speak with one of us for a personal consultation.